gentlemen, please give yourself a round of applause. You showed up today. My name is Thomas Lucas. I stand with Equal Justice Now. Equal Justice Now is a nonprofit organization that stands for the rights, fights for the rights of all people. Our national spokesman, Attorney Benjamin Crump, you see him do that all day long, every day. Today, we're here to talk about bail reform. We're here to talk about mental health, both really key initiatives for the organization. I've been working with Equal Justice Now for some time now, almost 6-7 years, and it's been an amazing time. It's been a painful time. It's been great work. We travel the country doing these national discussion panels where we hope to bring education, which is why we partner with amazing schools like Bowie State University. Please give your school your university a round of applause. I would like to be the first to tell you, Attorney Crump is ecstatic to be able to show up once again here. We know he was just here not too long ago. Attorney Crump, as you all know, there is a lot going on in the world right now in America in regards to flights and airports and 4-hour wait times and all that good stuff. And so I'm here to tell you Attorney Crump will be here for this event. He will be signing books. Thank you for coming out. Just bear with him as he's on his way, taking a mild break from saving the world. And so if we can give Attorney Crump a round of applause, we'd appreciate that. Also, you're going to be clapping a little bit here. We'd like to give thanks. Please thanks the AV team in the back. They've worked with us amazingly up until this point to make sure that everything goes as planned. Thank you. A couple of rules. We know you all are going to handle yourselves perfectly fine tonight, but it has to be said. We like to conduct a very well professional environment and panel for our panelists and all involved. We ask that you do not do any heckling. You know, we know that the topics at hand may cause for difference of opinions, but please give respect to the panelists. If you disagree, you disagree. There should be an opportunity for you to speak your thoughts, maybe. With that being said, I would like to hand over the microphone to and introduce your Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs, Dr. Amusu. Please give him a round of applause.
Let's give Mr. Lucas a hand, please. Thank you, Mr. Lucas. And thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm Guy Amusu. I humbly serve as the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs here at Bowie State University, that I call my home. I've been here for about 12 years. And we're delighted to have the Equal Justice Now team be here with us for this important conversation. So let's give the whole team of Equal Justice Now a hand, please. The whole team. And I want to acknowledge our team here at Bowie State University, folks from under the leadership of VP Ram, Event and Conference Services, the communication area. Let's give our team at Bowie State and this department that is hosting us a hand for welcoming us for all the planning. Thank you, everybody. On behalf of Amin Tabro, President of Bowie State University, and the larger BSU community, it is an honor to welcome you to the National Panel Discussion on Mental Health and Bail Reform hosted by Attorney Benjamin Crump and co-organized by Bowie State University, the oldest HBCU in the state of Maryland. Yes, Attorney Crump will be rejoining us later this evening, and this morning he was talking at the United Nations, and as you just heard, things happen. but we're confident that he will be here today joining us. So tonight, we'll welcome him again and his team for the second time in 6 weeks to our campus, because he was recently here for convocation. Attorney Crump has established himself as one of the nation's foremost lawyers and advocates for social justice, winning a number of record settlements and verdicts for victims and families that have faced injustice. We have seen this in the news, but let me remind all of us the great work he and his team are doing. Attorney Crump has worked on some of the most high-profile cases in the U.S., representing families of Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Tyre Nichols, Botane Chain, and Anreita Lacks in landmark medical reparation case. His recent victory includes a $310 million verdict for the family of Tyreen Sampson and a $98 million verdict on the family of Botane Chain. He also represented the residents of Flint, Michigan, who were affected by the poisoned water of the Flint River, achieving a settlement of $626 million. That's a tall feat. In 2022, Attorney Crump was retained by Randy Cox, whose police brutality case reached a $45 million settlement the following year, believed to be the largest pretrial settlement ever in the police brutality case. In the historic case of Tamara Lehner versus Harvard, Crump's passionate advocacy before the Massachusetts Supreme Court led to a ruling in favor of Lehner, who sued Harvard over its possession of photographs of her enslaved ancestor, which are valued at approximately $100 million. Netflix chronicled Attorney Crump's career in an award-winning documentary, Civil. Crump's book, Open Season, Legalized Genocide of Colored People, reflect on his landmark cases and systematic discrimination in the legal system in the United States. He's the founder and principal owner of Ben Crump Law. We will have a signing of this book later today. Attorney Crump is serving as a host for tonight's event that includes 2 panel discussion topics that impacts community of colors, mental health, and bail reform. I would like to acknowledge tonight's panelists, which include Dion Bursey Reeder, CEO, Far Southwest Family Strengthening Collaborative. Let's acknowledge her, please. Mario Williams, civil rights attorney and president, HDR Law Firm. Let's acknowledge him as well. Davon Love, Director of Public Policy for Leaders of Beautiful Struggle. Let's acknowledge her as well. Stephanie Rawlings Blake, former mayor of Baltimore. Let's acknowledge her as well. Malcolm Ruff, civil rights and trial attorney and associate for Murphy, Falcon, and Murphy. Let's acknowledge as well. And our own faculty here at Bowie State University, Dr. Yanelich, who is associate professor in the Department of Psychology and executive committee member of the Bowie State University, University of Maryland Social Justice Alliance. Let's acknowledge Dr. Lynch. I can tell she has some supporters in the audience. Dr. Natasha Harris, Associate Dean of the College of Professional Studies and co-founder and co-executive director of the Institute for Restorative Justice in Practice. Let's acknowledge Dr. Harris as well. And the work we are we're doing tonight and the conversation embodied the great work we're also doing at Bowie State University. And Dr. Lynch and Dr. Harris embody everything that makes our academic community so special here. And we're so glad we're partnering with Benjamin Crump team. We couldn't be prouder to see them representing Bowie State University at the national level. Their leadership not only inspires our students to be more socially conscientious, but also help them see firsthand just how much a difference they can make when they get involved in social justice issues, particularly in our communities. As I close, I invite us to reflect on those words from the next voice you will hear during this panel. There is nothing more noble, I think, we can do than give a voice to those who have no voice. That charge calls us into this space, grounded in listening, learning, and engaging across perspective to pursue something better. It also makes tonight's conversation not only timely, but necessary. Please join me in welcoming the panel, and I know Mr. Lucas will introduce the next speaker, but let's have a great and productive conversation. Thank you.
Again, my name is Thomas Lucas. And now, before we move forward, the person that I'm about to introduce is, I hold him very dearly to me. He's a major figure in my life. He asked me to be a part of this organization that he was starting a few years ago, 7 or so years ago now. It's called Equal Justice Now. He's the president. He's the co-founder. We've traveled this country together doing this work. And man, it's been a hell of a time. And so with that being said, my job is to get up here and keep it short. I'm going to do that. I would like to introduce our president and co-founder of Equal Justice Now, Tony Smith.
Thank you, Thomas. I first want to, this is not possible with, boots on the ground. And our team here, Amanda, Aaron, Chris, Thomas. Did I miss anybody? Can you give them a hand? Aaron. I also want to thank Bowie State. I mean, this is just great that they opened their doors to us and Ben to have this conversation that's necessary. Give them a hand as well. So I'm the co-founder of Equal Justice Now, and it's a truly an honor to be here today, to be a part of a conversation that matters, not just to our communities, but to the future that we're all working hard for. At Equal Justice Now, our mission is simple: to stand for fairness, accountability, and equal opportunity for everybody, regardless of background or circumstances. And gatherings like this are important because real change starts with people coming together, having conversations, and having ideals and talking about them. It is my honor today to introduce our moderator, Dr. Richey. Dr. Richey is a respected civil rights advocate and education expert who has dedicated his career to advancing equity, justice, and opportunity for all. His work spans media, public policy, and community leadership, where he has consistently been a strong and thoughtful voice on issues that truly matter. What makes Dr. Richey especially fitting? Our moderator is his ability to guide meaningful conversations, him bringing his knowledge, his balance, and insight and perspective. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Richey.
How's everybody? I know you all have already been clapping like we're in a Baptist church, but I'm going to ask you to clap one more time for Equal Justice Now and my big homie being Crump and all of the leaders. I'm pressed for time, and so I need to bring the panel out, get involved in this discussion. I'm thankful to be here, and I come from the legacy of HBCU life, and it is always a blessing to see the genius of scholarship. So let's give our future leaders who are out here a round of applause as well. We have two primary issues that we will discuss, and I like to have discussions. One, bail reform. We will also talk about mental health. These are not totally separate. There's some overlapping dynamics. I want us to think chess, not checkers. So we're going to talk about this in a thoughtful way and also come up with some solutions. I will be going to the audience for Q&A at a certain time. Benjamin Crump is on the way. You may see him walk in to my right. I will transition to our second topic during that time, and we will bring Ben Crump to the stage. Is that good with everybody? All right. Let's bring our panelists out. Our first panelist, I bring her to the stage, former mayor of Baltimore, Stephanie Rawlins Blake. Associate Dean, College of Professional Studies, Associate Professor, Department of Criminal Justice, none other, Dr. Matasha L. Harris. Civil Rights and Trial Attorney, Associate at Murphy, Falcon and Murphy, we have Attorney Malcolm Ruff. Community Activist Extraordinaire, Devontae Hill. Director of Public Policy, Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, none other than Davon Love. Last but absolutely not least, we have a bail bondsman from Memphis, Tennessee, Mr. Andrew Bannon. Okay, we're going to have a discussion. And I know you all are facing the audience, and we'll pivot back and forth. I actually would like to start with the bail bondsman in the room. Our first conversation will be about bail reform. There's some realities about bail reform that maybe the bail bondsman gets blamed for, but it's more of a judicial issue. The first question I want to pose will go directly to Andrew Bannon because you are a practitioner in that industry. Do you believe bail or the system of the bond creates an unequal system that economically impacts individuals, or it impacts individuals economically? Either way would be fine. Can you answer that question?
Yes, sir, I'd be delighted to. Bail bond companies, we are regulated by the court. The court assesses bail, and so whatever the court sees fit to set bail in a particular situation, we have to abide by that, and that's at the court's discretion. And if families are able to meet that financial obligation, they of course can get their relative or family member out of jail, and if they can't, they won't. In many instances, the bail bond company serves as a bridge to help families to be able to help their people who are in need. Without a bail bonding company, most defendants don't have the full 10% of the bond in order to secure release. So most bail bond companies provide a service to where we'll take a percentage of the premium and we will allow the defendants to pay over time to complete their 10% on their bail. And so the bail bond company supports families in being able to do that. But I don't think economically, one way or another, we're in the middle of that fight. Again, we do compliance, and whatever the court decides is the best thing or in the best interest of the defendant, paired with also trying to make sure that public health and safety is maintained. It's all on the courts.
Let me ask a follow-up to Mayor Rawlings Blake, because the issue he just brought up, public safety, is one of the catalysts for why you have to put up surety to come back to court. And I don't want to be disillusioned or anybody to be disillusioned. Bond or the system of bond is for your promise to come back to court. It should not be a punishment, and it is not by law supposed to be punitive. It is surety to come back to court. So, Mayor, let's talk about a public policy dynamic. As mayor, your job was also to keep people safe.
Absolutely.
Now, if a person puts up, let's say, $1,000, okay, they have a particular charge, $1,000, that gets them out of jail because the common logic is they will come back in order to not have to pay the 90% of the full bond. People can put up their homes. Tell us about the cause and effect as you see the bond system, the bail system, and how it could adjust in order to meet a better policy dynamic.
Ooh. So I will say I'm not the expert in that. I will say that one of the things you mentioned is how it's unfair, right? And it shouldn't be punitive. But we've been talking backstage about the fact that if there is a system in this country, whether it was designed to be equal or not, we know in its application it is not equal. We know that the systems and the programs, even the ones that are diversion or alternative programs that are set up to get people out of jail and into different, under supervision, we know that it's inequally applied. So if you have mental health issues, if you are indigent, we know that disproportionately you will not be able to participate in many of these programs. So, I think we have to do a better job and a holistic job of identifying more ways to realistically protect the public, but also make sure that people that need to be in jail are in jail, and the people who can be monitored in the community have a real opportunity to do that. Because just because you're giving someone the opportunity to get out on bail doesn't mean that they can take you up on that opportunity. And sometimes the families that can afford it the least are negatively impacted by all of the other things that they have to do to maintain while they are out.
Well said. I want to talk to Attorney Ruff. It's interesting because the judge sets the bond. You pay the bail. How many have ever paid somebody's bail before? Don't be embarrassed. Y'all, how many? 1, 2, 4. All right. So something interesting that the bondsman said, Mr. Bannon, is that he will work with individuals who don't have the 10%. So you're basically saying a payment plan, am I right?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So to Attorney Ruff, in the system, the bond company or the bail bondsman company, they have no power over the judicial order. The judge does. And every judge has to be an attorney, pass their bar before they become a judge. Generally in law school, everybody's let's set the captives free, right? That's how, well,
Depends on the law school.
depends on the law school. You're right about that. So what happens to where judges, in your opinion, get to the space of where they use bond as a punitive issue, if they do so? And what's your take on that?
For sure. Number one, I love you. You're the
Love
man.
you back.
I can't go like 2 days on my fellas group chat without somebody sending me one of your clips. So can y'all give it up for my brother Rashad? So I have to come at it from the lens of being a practitioner in Maryland primarily, but also I come at it from the lens of being a member of the General Assembly as well. I represent a district in Baltimore City, District 41, and so, this is where the judiciary and the legislative come together. As far as the reason why, in my view, judges often in Maryland have a punitive lens when they are setting bail really falls down to a gap in the law, in the laws that we've established. In Maryland before 2017, and I know my brother Davon will extrapolate on this further, there was a huge movement to reform how we effectuate the bail system in Maryland, where there was a recognition under a new statute, Maryland Rule 4-216.1, under the criminal procedure article, that essentially required judges to consider what a defendant could actually pay, what their what their wealth was or lack thereof was before setting bail, which was a huge step. Right? Before that, judges consider every factor except for what could this person reasonably pay that would not impoverish them in order to meet constitutional parameters, because we're talking about the intersection of two constitutional parameters here. The first being equal protection, and the second being your due process rights, right? Your right to be treated fairly as someone else similarly situated to you, which we really addressed in that. And like I said, Davon's gonna cover that. We made it so that two people, that one is wealthy and one is not, should not get different results simply because that one person is more wealthy. But what we didn't do was really address the due process piece, and that's really a part of having a meaningful hearing, right? A hearing and a finding that is individualized to your particular situation, which is guaranteed in that piece of paper, right? So pretrial detention, for me, is the place where the Constitution and real life come together, and we gotta get it right. But where we get it wrong is this gap I was mentioning, which is there is no, before I say what I'm about to say, everyone knows that there is a standard for whether or not someone is guilty or innocent at trial. What's that standard? Where are my BSU students at? Reasonable doubt, beyond a reasonable doubt. There is typically a standard for every decision that a judge has to make. It could be beyond a reasonable doubt. It could be by a preponderance of the evidence. You've heard of probable cause, and you've also heard of clear and convincing evidence. In Maryland, there is no standard. We leave discretion way too much up to the judges. There is, and so what my proposal would be is that we need to establish a clear and convincing standard of what it means to be a present danger to the community, right? Because if we lay that out and say that there is a stringent line, or at least a gray area that says, based on these factors, we know that if we let this person out, there is a likelihood that they're going to bring harm to someone, themselves, the community. We will have less of this punitive decision-making by judges. And like I said, we have to get that right because the consequences are so dire. You're losing jobs. People are losing jobs. They're losing their homes. They're losing their livelihoods and losing generational wealth. Like Madam Mayor said, my constituent, we're just absolutely losing things on an unequal playing field, right? And only our community is suffering.
Dr. Harris, great answer. Dr. Harris, studies show there's a significant racial bias in the judicial review of defendants. That's just in a judicial review. That's metadata, okay? Without bail, we would run the risk of minorities being held for crimes that non-minorities would be released for because of judicial discretion. So I'm bringing the policy question to you because our dear brother just brought up some of the policy challenges. What are the remedies in that policy question of judicial oversight?
Excellent question. Well, one thing, and from my point of view, cash bail is not neutral. It's not a neutral remedy, and it impacts our people, particularly when we think about individuals who are in the criminal justice system. The disproportionate number are actually African American. And so when we see cash bail, the impact that it has on our community is astonishing. And so with cash bail, it's basically stating that it is a wealth-based detention system. So in that, when we think about policy, aside from cash bail, there are other ways in which individuals can be released. There's unsecured bond. We have conditional release, pretrial diversion. And so there are other mechanisms outside of cash bail that can be beneficial to our people.
Very well said. Davon Love, let's talk about this from the aspect of everyday people who go before a judge and they're told this line, and this line is you're innocent until proven guilty. It really should be innocent unless you're proven guilty. They say until as if it is evident you're going to be. But they read this line to you. Then they do something that creates a criminal penalty. And that's, we're going to give you this bond, right? And the bond outweighs the value of your current assets. It's not a fair bond system. What have you seen? What is the cause and effect of that kind of system to individuals who face it on a regular basis?
So before I directly address that, I just want to give an important preface to put it in context. It's important to be clear that the last 500 years of human history has been marked by European domination of the world. That we live in a society structured on racism and white supremacy, and one core engine of that system are projecting a propaganda campaign of the notion of inherent black criminality, the notion that black people are inherently prone to violence. And so that was part of the justification for enslavement, right? Because white folks saw themselves as civilizing us, right? So that's important context, because when we think about the way the criminal justice system is weaponized against our community, it is those very stigmas of us being inherently criminal and inherently violent that provide the fuel, right, that makes black folks be crushed by the criminal justice system in the way that it is. That's important context, because in Maryland, as Delegate Ruff mentioned a few moments ago, we initiated bail reform as a result of a report that the Office of the Public Defender did in 2016. In that report, they found that there were 7,000 people over a 5-year period from 2011 to 2016, 17,000 people that had spent 5 days or more incarcerated because they couldn't afford $500 or less, right? And to top that, bail bondsmen were the premiums, the revenues that came from the premiums, the largest revenue generating zip codes weren't the ones that many of us would predict, right? So if you're in Baltimore City, you're familiar with Park Heights, familiar with Sandtown, right? Those are the places where bail bondsmen were generating the greatest number of their revenue. In fact, over that same 5-year period, from 2011 to 2016, the bail industry generated $300 million in profits from the bail industry. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is a lot of folks for whom have spent time in jail because they couldn't afford bail, those stories aren't salient in our media context, right? So in many respects, they end up suffering silently, right, as a result of this dynamic. Now, what has happened in Maryland, and it's important, we actually were talking backstage, and I think it's important to be honest and clear-eyed about the impact of pretrial reform in Maryland. Because I would say the good news is that the bail bond industry has significantly deteriorated in Maryland, that there are a lot more people getting bail so they can afford. And the rule change that Delegate Ruff mentioned was essentially that judges had to consider all non-financial conditions for release. And then if they do give a bail, they have to give a bail that a person can afford. And so that deteriorated the bail bonds industry in particularly the central region, the most populous region of the state. The bad news is that in the more remote regions, right? So in Western Maryland, on the Eastern Shore, where you have more conservative judges that are making decisions that instead of letting a person go down reconnaissance, they're holding more people, right? And so that is a concern. I want to be clear, though, that cash bail at best is an intermediary step in those circumstances. And the reality is that black people, the notion of inherent black criminality is political and economic currency in this society. And so whether it's bail, whether it's electronic monitoring, right? There are other industries that will emerge that will try to profiteer off of the notion of inherent black criminality. And so I think, so we get to solutions. I know you didn't ask this, but I think it's important in terms of solutions, is that we have to be able to advocate for increased investments in the kind of pretrial interventions that diminish the applicability of the need for cash bail. Similar to the fact that you think about the Office of the Public Defender, they're under-resourced, right? There's a kind of an informal understanding if you get a public defender, you're not going to get good representation. Not because the lawyers aren't good, but because of the caseload.
Right.
So as a society, we just have to make a decision that if we're going to give people the right to legal counsel, right? If it's truly innocent until proven guilty, then there needs to be investment in the public institutions needed to protect our community from the way that our oppression is monetized. Otherwise, black people are going to continue to be crushed by the criminal justice system. And unfortunately, many of those will suffer in silence because those aren't the sensational stories that media is prone to put out there.
Well said. Devontae Hill. Give a round of applause. I'm going to Devontae Hill with my next question. It is interesting that prosecutors do receive so much of the resources to prosecute. Public defenders who technically work for the same unit of government receive less resources to defend. Only one of those positions is constitutionally mandated. That is the public defender. You have a right to counsel, but it's under budgeted. Now, here's the other part of that conversation with bail. So there are people that will say, well, if you remove bail, it will increase crime. Yet a series of reviews show the opposite. As a matter of fact, 12 out of the 13 jurisdictions reviewed after implementing bail reform, crime actually went down. So now you have, how many people knew that? Not too many. So now you have this PR issue. You have the public relations aspect of this. How do you get this out to the community? Because as our dear brother said, the first casualty is the truth to criminalize black people just because of the epidermis, the color of our skin. So what say you about the community aspect of getting out this good information, because good information can somehow, hopefully, shape good policy?
As we begin at the genesis of all of this, I think we first have to begin to understand that the bail system itself starts with lawmakers with every state. Whether it's Maryland, whether it's the state of Tennessee, lawmakers are deciding what our bail systems look like, and they are advocating even now. I think Donald Trump was in Memphis, Tennessee yesterday, and our state lawmakers in Memphis, Tennessee, they are doing the work to get rid of our DA in Shelby County. And so lawmakers are truly the ones that are driving this narrative, and they are going above and beyond driving the PR, as you would say, the PR narratives that fit the party that they are trying to create, if you will. Just as so as we've seen in immigration, where we've seen an inflation of calling undocumented, law-abiding immigrants criminals. Mm-hmm. And being able to conflate the definition between the two. I think the same thing is synonymous when we discuss the topic of bail and bail reform. Even if the bail system deteriorates and it diminishes and disappears, there will still be an opportunity for those same lawmakers to increase their capacity in other aspects, such as monitoring, parole, probation. These are still the enemies at war, even when we remove bail from the conversation. And so I think if we truly want to get to the nexus of what it looks like to remove bail, the bail system, and to see that decrease in crime, I think we have to begin to put emphasis on prevention, crime prevention, and driving that narrative into the direction of those who are, as you would say, those who are being overfunded to prove that you are a criminal.
Right, right. Madam Mayor?
I just want to add a few things, particularly from the perspective of the Public Defender's Office. Prior to, while I was on the City Council, I was in the Public Defender's Office for almost 10 years, and whoever made the point about, absolutely right. the caseload that we had compared to the state's attorneys was ridiculous. And you do the best that you can, but you do the best that you can with the same 24 hours that prosecutor has. So until we fund the public defender's office adequately, our community is always going to be disadvantaged. But one of the things that I think we should, also put on the table is that politically, the political part of bail reform is hard. It's hard for advocates, but it's also hard for lawmakers, especially in this climate, because we know that there could be 10,000 people who participated in pretrial services, benefited from pretrial services, and didn't reoffend. And there's not one article written about that. But when you get one person, and I'm not diminishing any recidivist or recidivism, the alleged crime, but if you get one person that does something horrific while out on pretrial, everybody's covering it. So I feel like what that means is advocates, community members who know better, we have to positively and affirmatively and not talk about it and not just react to the next tragedy. Because our story, just like you were saying about calling, it's my iPhone, I'll get it, talking about calling undocumented people now, the conversation is they're criminals. We have to change that conversation. We have to rename it. We have to affirmatively say that we know that this works.
Yeah. Yes. And to our bail bondsman, Andrew Bannon, go ahead, brother.
In talking about bail reform, this is a hard question that has to be on the collective conscience of everybody. And I want to ask the audience some very hard questions now, because we've got to get a very balanced idea about bail in this country. Is there anyone here who's ever had a family member murdered? Anybody here ever had their car stolen, home burglarized, the victim of domestic abuse, the victim of sexual assault? And the person that's arrested for that crime, they are innocent until proven guilty. But before you can get home from the hospital or from the funeral home, they're at home. They're right back at home because they were indigent, they were poor, and their color said that the system was unfair to them. So you've got to ask yourself that question. Yes, do we have people in our community, black and brown people, who would benefit from pretrial diversion, pretrial release, who deserve to be afforded that concept of innocent until proven guilty? But there are those among us that absolutely need bail. And to put that on the backs of the taxpayers, which when most individuals are released on pretrial diversion or detention, given the benefit of pretrial release, we hope that they won't commit another crime while they're out, but sometimes they do, and that generates a warrant. And when that happens, that's on the back of you to make sure that that person is found and brought to justice. So, yes, there are some problems with bail, but bail should not be completely villainized by anyone in our community, because who protects the innocent? Mm-hmm. Who's going to protect them? So this question has to be looked at thoughtfully and from a number of different perspectives in order for us to have a good idea about how we want to approach this within our own community. Thank you, brother.
Well said. And I'm going to go to you. Yes, Q&A from the audience is coming up, so get your questions ready. Dear brother, go ahead.
Yeah, I think to the brother's point, it's vitally important that we just realize that the conversation of bail reform is not a new topic. This is something that we've been discussing probably a decade now. And I think the reality the reason why it has not advanced in such a way is sometimes can come as an activist. It can come for our radicalized perspective of what things should be, and not necessarily having a balanced perspective, as the gentleman would say, who will protect the innocent. And when we remove ourselves, and I hate to use the term radical, but radical reform is sometimes very necessary.
Yes.
But the language around it, I was an intern with Congressman John Lewis during the time when we were fighting and saying, defund the police. And while the genesis of defund the police and what we were saying was very clear, very necessary, and incredibly needed, the language we were using was being used against us. And I think the advancement of bail reform probably could have found itself further along the road if sometimes if we could just reshape the language and what it is that we're trying to see and make sure that it's tangible, but it also protects the rights of those who have been violated in some capacity.
Yeah. I'm going to go to Dr. Harris, and then, Attorney, I'll come to you to piggyback on what you just said about defund the police. At least it got folks' attention. At least it got folks' attention. Here's a pivot point. You know who defunds the police more than any other entity in America? The police. When there's a settlement for $150 million, that's defunding the police. So they are the greatest defunders of the police. And that argument is a good argument to start equalizing the opportunity at reform, because none of us want bad cops. The taxpayer shouldn't want a bad cop. If you're a taxpayer, you don't want a bad cop because that costs you money. Dr. Harris?
Yes, I just wanted to say and make it completely clear that cash bail is not about a risk or public safety. It is about access to wealth and access to money.
All right, Attorney Ruff.
Well, I'm going to push back a little bit on you, Brother Richey, because even though, the police end up having to pay when they are found to have violated people's constitutional rights and have used excessive force and have slain us in the streets and have paralyzed us and disregarded us and degraded us. The problem with that, with us saying that they're defunding themselves, is that they're actually defunding y'all, right? Because they're either using an insurance policy or they're coming straight out of the general fund to pay that note. And Brother Crump, I think he just walked in. And he knows all about that because he done got all the top settlements and judgments in the country. But I want to pivot back because, like Brother Crump says, equal protection under the law is not a slogan, right? It's a mandate. And there is not, there does not have to be a disregard of public safety for the benefit of fairness and vice versa. And what we're talking about here is ensuring equal protection while also ensuring that we are keeping people safe. And that's why I will continue to harp on having a stringent standard to determine when somebody really is a risk and making sure that the discretion of judges doesn't continue to eviscerate the Black community.
And Attorney Ruff, just know you and I don't disagree on any of that, dear brother, at all. Madam Mayor.
To piggyback on the delegate's point, the police is always going to be funded. And I don't remember a year when police, the budget line for the police department went down. It's either here, it stays the same or goes up.
Right.
So when there's less money to pay into it, it comes out of record parks. It comes out of infrastructure money. It comes out of, all of the other things. But, to the point that we were making, it hurts everybody.
Right.
When we're dealing with cops that don't play by the rules.
Right. And I want to follow back up with that, Madam Mayor. Before I do, can we give the people's champ, America's attorney, Ben Crump, a round of applause? He will be up in just a moment. Madam Mayor, I want to ask you a question because you made a great point about they never get a decrease in funding. I don't know any other governmental agency who never has shrinkage I've never heard watershed development, waste management having just increases and increases. And the reality is, if you're doing your job, if public safety is actually being achieved, you need less cops. Does that make sense, everybody? If you actually have a decrease in crime,
it makes,
right? In theory, right?
In theory, but the reality is, while I can speak from my experience.
Yes.
When I went to communities that were suffering with violent crime, they didn't want less police. They wanted more good police. Mm-hmm. So, crime is, and it's going down, but communities just want, whether the budget stays the same, goes up, goes down, they want good police officers.
And they want public safety, right? So public safety is the idea, not policing.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay.
Can we also add context to what public safety actually is? I think we have this conversation. Public safety has to include more than just police officers.
Right.
Public safety, it has to include addressing health disparities, housing and affordability. I think that was the thing that I really wanted to see yesterday with some of our state lawmakers who were at the round table with the president. If we can realize that public safety is not just police officers and hiring more agents and officers. Public safety it has to be a holistic conversation. And when we have that conversation that way, we'll realize that crime is simply the byproduct of poverty.
That's right.
That if we really want crime to go down in our communities, we have to make significant investments into education, into the housing disparities. There are people who are outside breaking the law because the home that they live in is deteriorating.
Right.
If you don't like where you live, you'll probably find refuge outside of that place.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
There's Amos Wilson wrote this book, Black on Black Violence. And in it, I'll paraphrase, he describes the phenomena of violence in our communities as an externalization of a suicidal impulse. That when you live in a society that tells you you're worthless, that you're worthless, tells you that you're inherently criminal, it's easy to harm someone that looks like you, right? Or easier. And I think that's important because I think there's the argument about the importance of the socioeconomic inequalities that our community faces that contributes to violent crime. But there's also the kind of generations of the internalization of notions of inherent black criminality that make our community feel less reticent about harming our own. And that's not something that you fix through law enforcement, right? And in fact, when we talk about Baltimore City has experienced one of the steepest declines in homicides and non-fatal shootings in a generation. At the same time that law enforcement says that they're between 500 to 1,000 police officers short. Now, what does that tell us about how do we address violent crime? What it tells us is that, and part of what I would argue, and I think many folks would argue, was the biggest contributor. Lots of credit to go around, but the biggest contributor has been a network of formerly incarcerated folks, people formerly in street organizations, community violence interrupters,
That's right.
who are able to go out and address those conflicts many times before they happen, right? And they're able to credibly engage communities that many of us couldn't engage. And that's the way, and what we're seeing in Baltimore is building that infrastructure is what has addressed the issues of violence. And I want to say, pivoting back to bail reform in particular, I think we have to be careful about the way that narratives about our community distort the reality. So what happens is that, and I'm gonna say it, Sinclair Broadcasting, they own 40% of the news stations local stations around the country, very prominent in Baltimore City. Its owner lives in the suburbs of Baltimore City, in Baltimore County. And what they do is they take the most egregious instances of violence, right? Things that we should care about, right? Those people deserve to have justice. But what ends up happening is that those extreme circumstances then get projected onto every circumstance where people come in contact with the criminal justice system. So what you find more often, if you talk to anybody that has been or proximate to people who've been in the criminal justice system, you're talking about things like gun possession. Now, people have guns. We shouldn't condone people having illegal guns, but it makes sense if you're in a community where you know people have it for you to carry one. Does that mean that you're prone to harm the community? No. But a lot of folks are getting incarcerated for gun possession. Or we're talking about first-degree assault, right? What's that? That's a fight. right? And so what happens is that those circumstances where me and Delegate Ruff get into a verbal altercation, he hits me with a glass over the top of my head. He not attempting to murder me, but they're gonna overcharge it because that's the way that they operate, right? And at the end of the day, we might end up being able to be cool afterwards, right? But those make up the majority of those that are in the criminal justice system, but the average person doesn't know that because the stories you hear are the extreme versions. And then that's why people then support the importance of bail, right? Because a part of it is the narratives they give you is, oh, these scary people are going to get out of jail if you don't. So I just think that's really important to understand the politics of the media representations that use the notion of inherent black criminality in order to justify a policy that many of us don't understand, that it's not going after the violent criminals. It's not going after the repeat violent offenders. It's going after the everyday discretions that we happen in our community that people don't deserve to be incarcerated for.
Let's give the panel a round of applause. I want to go to the audience. I'm flat out of time, and I have to do the second topic of mental health. Do I have any questions from the audience to either what? There you go, right there. Yes. What's your name? Stand up. What's your name? Speak as loud as you can. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Trish Floyd, and I have had the pleasure of working with the Maryland Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the last couple of years, so a couple of your faces look very familiar to me. I did hear the statement that crime is a product of those who are involved in or living in impoverished communities. But my question is in regards to the KKK and that whole system of white supremacists and how a lot of those people are rich, they are wealthy, they are well off, but they built a system that has systematically that is causing for people to fall into poverty, into issues that then create the cycle of crime. So how do we address that, the systematic behind the scenes, the invisible thread, if you will, that is kind of linking a lot of these issues together? How do we address that if we don't speak to the systematic reformation of what white supremacy is?
Great question. Yes.
I read a portion of course, I look to continue reading Attorney Ben Crump's book, but I think he mentioned something that I've even been a victim of, and it speaks directly to what it is that you're saying. The way laws are in most states, in a lot of states, particularly red states, certain laws are created to trap people who are in poverty, but also drag people into the systemic poverty system as well. I'll give you an example. If you can't afford to miss work continuously, you are more prone to take a trumped up plea charge and accept a diversion or accept a charge that's going to allow you to go home today because you can't afford to miss work, you can't afford bail, and you can't afford to find yourself prey waiting for a bail to be set. In Shelby County, if you go to jail today, even for a misdemeanor citation, you're probably going to be in jail at least 2 to 3 days, waiting for a bail to come. And when the bail is finally given, you got to wait. I'm not sure what my friend's services is like, but you got to wait for the bail bondsman to actually show up. So now you have been pulled over for not having your physical driver's license on you. The officer could have looked up your driver's license by your driver's license number, your social security number, but he opted out because he's got a quota he has to meet. So now you've been taken in. You've got to see the judge in the morning. So you've missed work today. You've missed work tomorrow. And now you got to wait for a bond to be. So you've missed 4 days out of work for a traffic stop. So you're more prone now to accept the plea. Yes, I'm guilty. Now you've got a strike on your criminal record, and you have found yourself in a system that is now created to milk you of your funds so that it can have more resources to prove that your colleagues and your community are filled with criminals.
And one thing that I would want to add is that there are certain popular narratives that go unquestioned. So, for instance, the way that law enforcement talks about fighting crime is that they focus on drug trafficking. And drug trafficking, if we're clear about the history of the war on drugs, the notion that a person selling drugs is inherently violent, as opposed to the fact that they're operating in an industry where the greatest access to capital is going to be the drug trade, and they can't call the police if they get robbed, right? So it's an inherently violent industry of people for whom that was the greatest opportunity made available to them. That stigma of drug trafficking driving crime no longer is true, right? If it ever was true, it's no longer true. There was a report that was done in 2018, 2019, the Western District in Baltimore City. It's, historically been one of the most violent districts in the city. And what they did is they assessed the percentage of the homicides and what caused them. And so the top cause, 33% of them were interpersonal disputes. The second were large group disputes. You don't get to drug trafficking until you get like fifth or sixth. So what ends up happening is you have law enforcement developing a strategy for fighting crime that is about notions of, again, inherent black criminality. We need to get these evil, bad black folks that are causing havoc in the community, right? And to the extent that folks do harm, they should be caught. But the majority of the violence and the homicides in our community is not as the result of drug trafficking, but it benefits prosecutors. And this is a point I think is really important. Prosecutors run for office. The political currency is for them to tell constituencies, we're not going to let these bad people mess up your nice suburban white American fantasy, right? That is the currency that prosecutors run on, right? And so it's to their benefit to then peddle that mythology because that's how they get reelected.
I would just want to add, your question is great because it plays into everything we've been talking about as far as how did we get here, right? And I think where we have to focus our attention is on redistribution of wealth. Because as my brother Davon says all the time, until black people have political and financial autonomy, we will continue to be at the behest and be the victims of white supremacy. And so that's why I'm really proud that Brother Davon actually brought me a piece of legislation this session where we're priming the pump on legislation we passed last year. We passed the Reparations Commission for the state of Maryland last year. It is going to study how we can create funds that will allow for redistribution of wealth, that will be distributed to the communities that have historically suffered from inequality and inequity. And I think until we can actually shift that paradigm where we have self-determination, we will continuously be in this cycle that we're talking about. So we pushed that legislation, and I'll tell you what it does. It created an excise tax on every endowment in the state of 4% for every endowment over $2 billion. Imagine what that would do for our communities if every endowment, Johns Hopkins has a $10 billion endowment, the Howard Hughes philanthropic organization that has like a $22 billion endowment, the Able Foundation, and all of these philanthropic organizations, most of which generated their wealth on our backs, right? We're getting our payback. And so we primed the pump for the future of the Reparations Commission in Maryland, and I would encourage every single person in this room to be a part of that fight and that movement because we need to get our just due as a people.
And with that, round of applause for all of our panelists. Thank you all so much for your continued leadership and service. You can exit the stage.